The unsettling hum of the fluorescent lights, a constant companion during her night shifts at Walmart, seemed to grow more insistent as Sarah's first year of employment wore on. Friends had warned her, their voices hushed, about the store's strange atmosphere. The unsettling creaks of the floorboards, the dim lighting that birthed phantom shadows in the periphery. A skeptic by nature, Sarah had dismissed their concerns as exaggerated tales meant to frighten newcomers. Now, alone in the break room, the air felt heavy, almost viscous, as if saturated with the residue of forgotten moments. The clock's slow, deliberate tick amplified the oppressive silence, each second an eternity as she counted down the moments until she could escape. Time twisted within the store's walls, stretching and compressing in unnatural ways. A prickle of unease crawled across her skin, a premonition she couldn't shake. Tonight, the feeling was focused, a beacon pulling her toward aisle 13. It stood apart, distinct from the mundane order of the other aisles. A subtle distortion clung to the air around it, a ripple in reality that hinted at a space beyond the confines of the store. The fluorescent tubes lining the aisle flickered erratically, casting a strobe-like effect that disoriented and unsettled, the mundane shelves seeming to stretch into an endless, echoing corridor. Whispers followed aisle 13. Hushed conversations among the employees, abruptly silenced whenever someone new, like Sarah, ventured too close. Stories of missing stockers, of twisted time, of a corridor that extended beyond the physical dimensions of the store. Sarah had initially scoffed, attributing the tales to overactive imaginations. But now, standing at the aisle's entrance, a strange compulsion, a magnetic pull, urged her forward. The air grew thick with a musky odor, the scent of stale air, and something indefinably other, like the phantom aroma of long-forgotten memories. A knowing smirk touched Janet's lips, her voice cutting through the oppressive silence. A veteran of Walmart, Janet had seen things others hadn't, understood the subtle shifts and whispers that permeated the store. The loss of her niece within these very walls years ago had left an unfillable void, a quiet grief that fueled her unspoken mission to guide others through the store's unsettling reality. Sarah watched as Janet navigated the ominous aisle with an unnerving confidence, a familiarity that bordered on the supernatural. She moved with a strange grace, as if a part of the shadows themselves, yet radiating an aura of resilience, an unspoken understanding. The flickering fluorescent lights painted her face in alternating washes of light and shadow, adding to the surreal atmosphere. Compelled by an inexplicable urge to understand, Sarah followed. Inside the aisle, the air thrummed with an unseen energy. The dimensions seemed fluid, the shelves towering precariously high, the aisle itself stretching far beyond its physical limitations, as if attempting to swallow her whole. Her senses heightened, the quiet hum of the refrigerators, the distant rustle of plastic packaging, each sound amplified, resonating with the weight of something lost, something forgotten. Time itself seemed to unravel. Her watch ticked, the rhythmic pulse a stark contrast to the stillness that enveloped her, the second hand frozen, mocking the passage of time. A heavy silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, threatening to shatter her composure. Panic clawed at the edges of her awareness, but she fought it back, clinging to rationality, knowing that surrender would only strengthen the unseen forces closing in. A faint echo, almost imperceptible, pulled her back from the brink. A sound out of place, yet strangely harmonious amidst the electric hum of the aisle. It resonated with the whispered stories of missing employees, tales woven into the very fabric of the aisle, pulling her deeper into its mysteries. Each lost worker had left an imprint, a subtle disturbance in the space-time continuum. Laughter and tears, hopes and regrets, all trapped within the metal and concrete. The aisle wasn't malicious, not in the traditional sense. It simply demanded recognition, an acknowledgement from those brave enough to see, to listen. Those like Janet, who understood its strange power, found a temporary peace, a fragile equilibrium within the loop, a yearning for eventual liberation. Janet's stories filled Sarah's mind, tales of souls caught in the aisle's endless loop, eternally bound yet somehow alive within its confines. Their voices carried on ethereal threads, linking past and present in an unbreakable chain of memory. A sudden shift, a blurring of reality, and Sarah found herself walking down a familiar street, bathed in the pale glow of a full moon. It was the street of her childhood, a memory so vivid it felt real. The solitary walks home, the quiet hum of the crickets, the weight of unspoken anxieties. She gasped, the memory so intense it stole her breath, the present momentarily forgotten. The sensation lingered even as she pulled herself back to the harsh reality of the aisle, the echoes of her past clinging to her like a shroud. The aisle probed her deepest vulnerabilities, her years of carefully constructed emotional distance crumbling as the ghosts of her past, regrets disguised as specters, choices masquerading as apparitions, materialized on the shelves. Each lane whispered untold stories, the air thick with unspoken anxieties and forgotten dreams, pushing her to the precipice of sanity. Sarah realized her spirit was tethered to these echoes, intricately bound to the aisle's strange power. Within their spectral forms lay the key to her freedom, a path forged through the shadows of her past. The whispers, though haunting, held the promise of liberation, a way to break free from the aisle's relentless cycle. Only by acknowledging, understanding, and ultimately transcending these echoes could she escape their hold. This realization marked a turning point, a shift in her perception, a blurring of the line between her internal struggles and the external reality of the aisle, preparing her for the next stage of her unsettling journey within Walmart's haunted walls. From nightmares to reality, escaping the Walmart loop. The oppressive atmosphere of aisle 13 clung to Sarah like cobwebs, a stark contrast to the sterile fluorescence of the surrounding Walmart. The whisper she'd initially dismissed now echoed in her very bones, a chorus of forgotten moments clinging to the stale, recirculated air. Time itself seemed to warp and stretch within the aisle's confines, each tick of her watch a labored groan against the unnatural stillness. The linoleum underfoot felt strangely soft, yielding with an unsettling sponginess that made her question the solidity of the ground beneath her. The shelves, stacked high with mundane merchandise, seemed to sway and shift in her peripheral vision, their contents blurring into indistinct shapes that hinted at something other, something more sinister. This wasn't just a place of commerce. It was a repository of memories, of lives lived and lost within these very walls. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and the familiar scent of antiseptic cleaner morphed into the cloying sweetness of her grandmother's perfume, a phantom aroma that transported her back to childhood summers spent in her dimly lit, antique-filled house. The fluorescent hum of the Walmart lights warped into the rhythmic tick-tock of a grandfather clock, each swing of the pendulum an echoing heartbeat in the sudden, oppressive silence. The shelves twisted and buckled before her eyes, the aisles elongating into an impossible labyrinth of shadows and half-remembered faces. Her brother's laughter, bright and carefree, echoed from the depths of the towering shelves, followed by the chillingly sterile beep of a hospital heart monitor. The image of him, pale and still in his hospital bed, flashed before her eyes, a raw wound ripped open anew. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a personalized torment, a cruel reflection of her deepest fears and regrets. The aisle pulsed with a low, rhythmic thrumming, a heartbeat that resonated not within her chest, but deep within the concrete floor beneath her feet. It was the store itself, breathing, remembering. Each shelf, each product, seemed imbued with a spectral residue, the echoes of countless hands that had reached for them, of lives intertwined with this place. The air shimmered, and for a moment, Sarah saw not the brightly lit aisles of Walmart, but a dimly lit corridor, lined with dusty shelves and forgotten merchandise. The phantom scent of mothballs and decaying paper filled her nostrils, a suffocating reminder of time's relentless march. This wasn't just her past. It was the collective past of this place, a tapestry of forgotten moments woven into the very fabric of the building. Just as the weight of it all threatened to crush her, a familiar voice cut through the suffocating fog of memory. Janet, a beacon of unwavering strength in this surreal landscape, stood at the edge of the aisle, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness. Her presence was a lifeline, a grounding force in the swirling chaos. Janet didn't speak, but her steady gaze conveyed a silent understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the strange power that held this place captive. It was an invitation, a silent offer of guidance through the labyrinth of Sarah's own past. Last checkout, a paranormal detective's redemption. The unsettling quiet of the post-midnight Walmart pressed in on Sarah as she left aisle 13, the key heavy in her pocket. The fluorescent lights, usually a sterile hum, buzzed with an almost malevolent energy, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to shift and writhe even when she stood still. The air, thick with the phantom scent of mildew and something akin to ozone, clung to her like a damp shroud. She found herself drawn towards the break room, a beacon of mundane normalcy in the increasingly surreal landscape of the store. Inside, the harsh white walls reflected the stark fluorescent glow, offering little comfort. Mike Ramirez sat hunched in a corner, the steam from his forgotten coffee curling upwards like spectral fingers. The rhythmic hum of the overhead lights provided a counterpoint to the unsettling silence that permeated the rest of the store. He stared into the lukewarm depths of his mug, the dark circles under his eyes mirroring the coffee's murky surface. The fluorescent lights glinted off the faint lines etched around his mouth, a testament to sleepless nights and a burden of memories he couldn't shake. He wasn't just tired, he was haunted. The quiet hum of the building's electrical system, usually a background annoyance, now offered a strange sense of predictability, a fragile anchor in a sea of unease. Mike's past clung to him like the shadows that stretched across the break room floor. Not long ago, he'd worn a badge, a symbol of justice and order in a world that often felt chaotic and unfair. He'd been a detective, a seeker of truth, in the small town of Havenwood, a place where secrets fester beneath a veneer of idyllic normalcy. He'd untangled complex cases, piecing together fragmented narratives like a weaver meticulously reconstructing a torn tapestry. But some knots remained stubbornly tied, some threads refused to be woven back into the whole. Those unsolved cases, those fragments of lives left hanging in the balance, echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of his limitations, of the darkness he couldn't quite illuminate. He carried the weight of those unresolved mysteries like the ghosts that now seemed to inhabit the very aisles of the Walmart, whispering secrets in the static hiss of the intercom and the rustling of unseen packages. Emily Murray, a whirlwind of vibrant energy, entered the break room, her sleek ponytail bouncing with each purposeful stride. The fluorescent lights seemed to brighten in her presence, her energy a stark contrast to the oppressive stillness. She was new to the night shift, a supervisor tasked with managing the skeletal crew that kept the store running during the quiet hours. Her youthful enthusiasm, however, hadn't been entirely dimmed by the late nights and the monotonous routine. A natural inquisitiveness sparkled in her eyes, a thirst for knowledge that both drew her to and made her wary of the strange stories that circulated among the night crew. Whispers of unexplained occurrences, of phantom noises, and of a chilling presence that seemed to permeate certain sections of the store had reached her ears, testing her initially skeptical nature. These weren't just ghost stories. They were woven into the fabric of the building, whispered in hushed tones between stocking shelves and checking out the last straggling customers. The rumors spoke of a cold spot near the electronics section, a place where the temperature seemed to drop several degrees and the air crackled with an unseen energy. Voices, disembodied and distorted, were sometimes heard emanating from the static-filled intercoms. Shadows danced in the periphery, mimicking movements that weren't there. The metallic clang of the midnight time clock, a sound usually ignored, resonated with an unnerving intensity, as if marking not just the passage of time, but the arrival of something other. Tonight, that metallic clang felt different to Emily, heavier, charged with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. It sent a shiver down her spine, a prickle of unease that tightened her chest and stole her breath. Emily noticed Mike in the corner, his posture radiating a weariness that went beyond the physical. His eyes, shadowed and distant, seemed to hold the weight of untold stories. She felt drawn to him, her curiosity piqued by the rumors of his past life as a detective. The break room's sterile environment, amplified by the hum of the fluorescent lights, suddenly felt oppressive. She slid into the seat beside him, her presence a small disruption in the quiet tension. She offered a tentative smile, a gesture of warmth in the cold, impersonal space. "Long night," she ventured, her voice soft, a counterpoint to the hum of the lights and the silence that seemed to press in from beyond the break room walls. Mike startled slightly, as if pulled from a deep reverie. He looked at her, his gaze momentarily unfocused before sharpening with a flicker of recognition. He nodded slowly, the lines around his mouth deepening. "They always are," he replied, his voice low and gravelly, tinged with a hint of something Emily couldn't quite place. It wasn't just fatigue. It was a resonance of something darker, something that mirrored the unsettling atmosphere of the store itself. That low growl, almost imperceptible, resonated again, rolling through the aisles like distant thunder. It seemed to emanate from the electronics section, a place where security alarms occasionally triggered without explanation, their shrill cries blending with the whispers of static and the hushed murmur of unseen voices. Employees had reported seeing flickering lights, misplaced items, and the unsettling sensation of being watched. The electronics section, it seemed, was the epicenter of the store's unsettling phenomena. A flicker of understanding passed between Mike and Emily, a silent acknowledgement of the shared unease. Emily felt a tingle run down her arms, a nervous energy that made her want to jump up and run. Yet she found herself rooted to her spot, inexplicably drawn into the mystery that seemed to surround Mike and the store itself. She chided herself for entertaining the possibility of the supernatural, for allowing the whispers and rumors to seep into her rational mind. Yet, here she was, captivated by the unspoken questions hanging in the air, the palpable sense of something unseen lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary. One evening, as the fluorescent lights hummed and flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the empty aisles, Mike reached into his worn leather jacket and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. Its cover was faded and worn, the corners softened with age, like a cherished childhood toy tucked away in the attic. He opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with a chaotic mix of handwritten notes, cryptic symbols, and intricate sketches. Emily leaned closer, drawn in by the strange energy that seemed to emanate from the journal's pages. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the lights. Mike's eyes held a distant look, as if he were seeing something beyond the break room walls. "Thresholds," he murmured, his voice low and intense. "There are places where the veil between worlds thins, where the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary blur." He pointed to a sketch in the journal, a complex diagram filled with symbols and interconnected lines. "This store," he continued, his gaze fixed on the diagram, "it's one of those places. A nexus, a place where the echoes of the past bleed into the present." Together, Mike and Emily began to explore the hidden depths of the Walmart, venturing into the dimly lit aisles, tracing the whispers of forgotten stories, and unraveling the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the mundane facade of retail. Their investigation became a shared journey, a quest for answers that transcended the mundane and delved into the realm of the uncanny. They were drawn together by a shared sense of purpose, a need to understand the strange occurrences that plagued the store and, perhaps, to find a measure of redemption in the process. The journey had begun, leading them towards a confrontation with the unknown, a final showdown in the heart of the fluorescent jungle. Unveiling secrets, the final showdown at Walmart. The chill that permeated the electronics section had little to do with the air conditioning. It seeped from the very circuits and wiring, a low thrum of unease that vibrated in the silence of the post-midnight Walmart. Mike and Emily, armed with the aged journal and a shared sense of foreboding, moved deeper into the aisle. Their flashlight beams danced nervously across rows of televisions, their blank screens reflecting back distorted images, like fractured memories struggling to coalesce. The linoleum underfoot seemed to absorb the light, leaving the spaces between shelves shrouded in an unsettling gloom. The air crackled with more than just static electricity. Whispers, thin and reedy, snaked through the air vents, weaving around them like curious spirits. Emily, her initial skepticism a distant memory, felt a prickling awareness, a hypersensitivity to the subtle shifts in energy around her. It was as though the aisle itself was breathing, each inhale drawing them further into its unsettling embrace. Mike, his senses equally heightened, stopped abruptly. He knelt by a shadowed section of flooring, his flashlight beam illuminating a series of crudely etched symbols. They mirrored the protective sigils detailed in the journal, yet these seemed wrong, frayed almost, like a worn-out shield struggling to hold back a rising tide. Wards, he breathed, the word hanging heavy in the frigid air. Meant to contain something, but they're failing. Emily crouched beside him, the cold seeping through her jeans, a tangible manifestation of the despair clinging to the space. The air tasted of dust and something else, something acrid, like ozone after a lightning strike. It spoke of volatile energies, barely contained, threatening to break free. A dormant touchscreen monitor, its surface thick with dust, seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. Emily hesitantly reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold glass. A jolt, not painful but deeply unsettling, shot up her arm. Images, fragmented and fleeting, flashed through her mind. Forgotten faces, hushed conversations, a pervasive sense of longing and regret. It was as though the monitor was a portal, a thin membrane separating the living world from a reservoir of trapped emotions. Driven by a primal urge to understand, Mike moved down the aisle, his hand trailing along the shelves, his fingers brushing against the cold metal and plastic casings of forgotten electronics. He was searching for something specific, guided by an intuition honed over years of chasing shadows and piecing together fractured narratives. The air grew heavy, the whispers intensifying, coalescing into distinct words, phrases laced with sorrow and a desperate plea for recognition. A flicker from the back of the aisle caught their attention. An old tube television, its screen a swirling vortex of static, sputtered to life. The sudden burst of light illuminated the aisle, revealing rows of dormant appliances, their surfaces coated in a thick layer of dust. Then, as if roused from a long slumber, other devices began to flicker and hum, their screens glowing with an ethereal light. The air vibrated with a strange energy, a palpable hum that resonated deep within their bones. It was a symphony of forgotten frequencies, a chorus of whispers weaving a tapestry of long-lost stories. Emily, drawn by an unseen force, reached for a dusty radio. Beneath her touch, it crackled to life, filling the air with the static of distant broadcasts, interspersed with snatches of distorted music and voices. A wave of grief washed over her, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to pull her under. It was a familiar grief, a deep-seated ache that resonated with her own personal losses. The radio was a conduit, a vessel containing the echoes of shattered dreams and unfulfilled promises. Across the aisle, Mike stood transfixed. The spectral voices had intensified, coalescing into a distinct presence, a shimmering form woven from light and shadow. It wasn't fully formed, but its energy was undeniable, a potent mix of pain and resolve. It spoke to him, not with words but with emotions, a torrent of images and sensations flooding his mind. He saw glimpses of forgotten lives, stories of heartbreak and betrayal, of hopes dashed against the unforgiving rocks of reality. The mission, their shared purpose, solidified in that moment. It wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about offering solace, about bearing witness to the untold stories trapped within the walls of this place. It was about communion, a bridging of the gap between the living and the dead, a chance for the lost voices to finally be heard.